JetsXFactor.
Good job today, man. It's one at a time, and we'll get the job done. Y'all know what to say on three. 1, 2, 3.
And the home of the Jets.
What is going on, everybody? It is Monday. Zach Wilson is a Bronco. Fans are happy. Fans are sad. Fans are arguing everywhere, but not me and Joe, because me and Joe are friends. And I will say this now. You were easily one of my favorite interviews during draft time because you keep it real, you don't back off, and you have actual facts and stats. Like, you don't regurgitate, like, well, I heard someone say, like, you actually keep it real. And like, listen, this is the reason why I believe in what I do.
I appreciate you, Tyson. I thought we were friends. You know, we had the good interview two drafts ago. I came to your tailgate. We got after it a little bit, and then I didn't get an invite back last year. So I'm kind of
Let's discuss tailgate. You attacked me at the tailgate with the shotguns. It was like 2 shotguns in 5 minutes. I think I'm still hungover from that tailgate.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, I think you know what the funny thing about that was I think we did shotguns. Then we did at least 2 or 3 shots, and then Ben Bussington asked me to line up 1-on-1 corner versus man rep, and I'm in like overalls. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I might have beat you." I was like, "I was like 10 beers deep here, guy." So, it was a good time though. Hopefully again this year.
Yeah, 100%, man. I always enjoy talking football with you, and like again. Your analysis, man, is so detail-oriented. Like, you know, during this time of year, I don't offer a lot of hot draft takes. I'm like, you know what? I don't spend hours upon hours upon hours researching like you do. So the first question I have for you is, like, how much time overall do you spend on this? And when do you start? Like, do you start last, like, you know, in the offseason? When do you start evaluating draft prospects?
Draft prospects, I would say pretty much after the NFL season. I really get into it in like January, February, March, April. I try to keep myself to like the first round guys just because with my schedule, I try not to, you know, look at 100 guys because I'm kind of wasting a lot of my time. So I'll do a lot of like Jet reviews and then look into like the top guys I think the Jets can get, you know, whether it be like 8 to 10 guys, whatever it may be. But we're kind of talking pre-stream. Each guy takes me at least like 15 to 20 hours of research, film, clipping it, doing shows. So there's quite a few hours that go into it. I appreciate you bringing me on for to get some of those opinions.
Yeah, and the one thing I wonder about is when you make an evaluation and you say, okay, listen, this is what I think about the player, and then you hear somebody that's respected out there that kind of differs with you, do you go back and research it again? Do you say, hey, you know what, they're looking at this, I'm looking at that, did I miss something? Like, do you go back and review things or no?
I would say no. Like, I don't know if that sounds like arrogant or not. Like people have different opinions of players, and that's completely fine. So I'm usually like after 20 hours of research and watching an entire season of a guy, I'm pretty like strong to my opinion, and maybe like I'll kind of hear out their opinion. Okay, this guy thinks this, even though I disagree. But yeah, typically I like to not really have an opinion of a player in terms of like looking at highlight films or other people's opinions, because I feel like it clouds you. Like if you hear, oh, this guy, you know, he can't run routes, whatever it is, and it kind of like clouds your opinion of him when you're watching. So I try to go in completely, completely basically like unknowledgeable about the guy and then really delve into it. And then after that, I do my own evaluations, and I tend to stray from the pack when some people don't necessarily like that. But it is what it is. So
get a lot of compliments. And comments about your analysis and your jersey too. That jersey's sharp as hell, man. That jersey's nice.
Yeah, dude, they are so much better. They're like now that Zach Wilson's gone, Adam Gase is gone, the stupid shoulder airplane things, the stripes didn't match, the jersey was terrible. So as of recent, I've had a pretty like bad, not like bad, but like a spending spree. So like the jerseys came out, I was just like green, white, black, order, and they all came within a week, which is wild. So I had to get the sauce one just because I had the other sauce one, but it looked like a block of cheese just kind of going down.
Yep.
Now it actually can kind of see that it's a one, so I had to get it and rep sauce. I think it's a safe jersey. He's going to be here for hopefully 10 years.
You know, and we'll mention Zach Wilson for just 1 second. I just want to cover this with you real quick, where it's like when the trade came out today. No surprise. We knew he was going to be gone at the end of last year. We knew he was going to be gone. There was no secret here. We knew there wasn't going to get a lot of value, but everybody's like, they're celebrating. Oh, well, Zach's gone. I'm like, I'm not really celebrating. For me, it's like, this was an organizational failure. Zach failed. The organizational failed. It set the Jets back like 2 years. It raised a lot of questions. How they handle the quarterback, the backup quarterback. So to me, it's like, all right, we can be glad that he's gone and root for him in Denver, but there's still the guys that were part of him are still here, right?
Yeah. It was an overall failure, right? Like, it's not just on Zach, it's not just on Hackett, it's not on just on the offensive line, but I pretty consistently his rookie year was saying, like, rookie OC, rookie head coach, no backup quarterback, no tight ends, no weapons. I'm like, the guys are not really going into the best situation. And I don't know, I think you were in Carolina, like sitting in the stands in Carolina, like, dude was getting murdered that first game. And it's like, this is not going to last very long if he keeps getting hit like this. So he had flashes in the pan, but I think not being in the best situation, being in New York with a lot of pressure, it snowballed. And then you just saw him lose confidence. Like, the guy at BYU, he didn't miss just throws to the flat. That didn't happen. And clearly he got into his own mental, and then it hurt him, with the Jets. I'm glad to be done with them. Well, we saved $2.75 million, I believe it was. And, it doesn't sound like the most money in the world, but 2.75 can get you Connor McGovern. Like, I'll take Connor McGovern back, Donovan Smith, whoever it may be. And then you move up in the draft 50 spots. You wipe the slate clean. I hope he doesn't succeed with Denver. I'm not one of those guys when Jet players go to the teams, I kind of hope they fail. So I don't ever hear about him again. So I don't really wish him the wellest of luck, but I'm glad it's over. And I'm glad that we actually got a little bit more than I thought we would. I thought that's going to attach like a 6th round pick to him to just get him off the team. But actually moving up in the draft, I'll take it. But I think it was an overall organizational failure with Zach, and obviously he had a part in it as well.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you mentioned the offensive line, which is the biggest story of the offseason. The Jets entered it with several holes. Joe Douglas did a clever job of addressing them. Trade for Morgan Moses caught us all by surprise. Tyron Smith surprised me because I thought he was going back to the Cowboys. I was shocked he came here. Then you get Simpson. What are your thoughts on the job Joe Douglas has done to this point with the offensive line? I think there's more moves that need to be made, but are you comfortable with the starting line as it is? Obviously, AVT coming off injury as well.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously it's important that we build depth. It's like the polar opposite of last year. We bring in AR or Rodgers last year, and it's like he just did nothing else. Like, okay, we got Rodgers, and we had a lot of injuries in the offensive line last year. So what are we going to do? We're going to bring in a injured 4th round rookie who's raw and Carter Warren, and hopefully that will fix the problem. It's the polar opposite. You bring in Tyron Smith, who, when he's healthy, he's still a top 5 left tackle. The dude is absolutely dominant when he plays. Hopefully the Jets staff can manage him well, which is obviously a big question. John Simpson, average level-ish type of guard. Really obviously made his money with the Ravens this year. Prior to this year, he's with the Raiders and didn't really do too much, but I like him as a player. Tippmann was solid in his rookie year. Obviously, it anticipate him to get a little bit better. AVT, I don't put so much stock into the triceps injury. That's kind of a freak injury, but coming off of an Achilles, like, does he lose some of the explosion that he has? So that's a question, and a reason you need to bring in a backup guard. And then right tackle Morgan Moses, he's been really consistent. Yeah. He was great with the Jets. He seemed to even get better with the Ravens, and he's been, knock on wood, relatively healthy. Last year he missed 3 or 4 games, but it's definitely a solid offensive line when you're talking about them healthy. They're a top 10 unit in my opinion. Assuming they gel and everything like that. So it's a good line. It's just a line that definitely needs depth at this point. You can't have Schweitzer and Carter Warren being your primary 2 backups. It just can't happen. So they definitely need to address the depth at this point, but that's something you could do in free agency for a couple of $1 million. It's not the biggest deal in the world.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where I was going with this, where it's like, we're going to talk about the draft, but to me, it's like you have guys out there that you can be your depth, your Bakhtiari, your Donovan Smith, Connor McGovern, that aren't going to break the bank. You could bring this. Okay, listen, you don't get a guy in the draft, don't panic. There's guys that are going to still be out there. Carter Warren with an NFL offseason. He was hurt last offseason. Maybe he could be a little bit better, Max. But like, there's pieces you can work with there. The Mike Williams signing excited everybody. I'm excited about him, but the injury concerns me where it's like, I don't know when he's ready to play. Now, I know we're going to be sold training camp. We're going to be sold week 1. Great. Love to hear it, but see it to believe it. To me, the wide receiver group is a concern because I want more. I don't trust Allen Lazard. Brownlee and Gibson are relatively on the way up trying to figure it out. You want proven pass catchers, proven route runners for Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball and trust. What is your state of mind on the Jets wide receiver group?
They basically have 2 guys, right? Like, I'm not trying to be an ass or anything like that, but we know Xavier Gibson, Jason Brownlee, Irv Charles, and all these guys because we're Jets fans. But like, in the NFL world, they're just Jags. Like, it is what it is. If I told you that Xavier Gibson's not going to be on the team this year, I don't think you'd really, lose your mind. Like, there's not really so much he did last year. Like, he had the big play against Buffalo. Then he also had a muff, I think, against the Eagles. He had a muff against the Chiefs, I believe, in maybe another game. So I think you're kind of working from his position where it's, hey, you have Garrett Wilson, who's a bona fide stud number one. You have another guy who you don't know when he's coming back from his ACL, when he's going to be in full health, if he's going to get injured again, again, knock on wood. So you need depth at that position, or not even depth. You kind of need a starter because in today's NFL, 11 personnel, you're running at 60, 65, 70% of the time, whatever exactly it is, for whichever team. But it's a starter. The Jets need one, they need depth at the offensive line. We could talk about defense. They can, running back two, whatever it may be, but they need one legitimate starter at receiver. And like you said, with the draft, and I'm sure we'll talk about options at 10 and offensive line receiver, in terms of the receivers in this draft, I think it raises your ceiling a little bit in terms of getting one of those guys. Whereas you draft a Fashanu, you draft a Fuaga, Fatanu, whoever it is at 10, and the difference between them and Donovan Smith or David Bakhtiari is better than any tackler you're getting in the draft for one individual game. Now we're talking about obviously injuries and all that comes into play, but for one individual game, you're not going to find a guy better than Bakhtiari. But even if it's not Bakhtiari, Donovan Smith, Cam Fleming, whoever exactly it's going to be, the difference between him and a rookie, I know people like to draft rookies and oh my God, they're going to be all pros, but realistically, considering they're not going to get all the starter reps and some of these guys are raw, it's going to take them a little bit to develop. So again, the difference in Donovan Smith to Fashanu versus the difference in, let's say, okay, in the world we draft an offensive lineman at 10 and we grab like a Tyler Boyd, the difference between Tyler Boyd and Marvin Harrison Jr. or Neighbors and Ordunze is much bigger than the difference between Fashanu and Donovan Smith to me. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly they fill the receiver hole, but they need a legitimate starter there.
Now, would you feel comfortable as a backup plan being like Beckham and Tyler Boyd, or just like, I want to get a guy in the draft?
Yeah. The backup plan being okay, Beckham and a Boyd. I don't really want to bring in Beckham just because I think he's more like bark than bite with his name. I think he'd be an okay receiver 3, but you start adding him with Garrett Wilson and Brees and all these guys who are going to want targets. Is he going to be happy here? I'd rather just not even have that distraction in the locker room. So I think Boyd, let's say if they were to go a tackle at 10, could you bring in a Boyd and then a guy at what's the third round picks, like 72, 73, whatever it is. Bring in, and if your receiver group is Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Boyd, and a third round receiver, okay, we could definitely work with that. But as of right now, you need at least one top tier guy, or at least like two decent guys just to kind of round out the group. Because Alan Lazard got paid, $11 million last year, and he got benched for 3 or 4 games. Yeah. Gibson again didn't really prove much of anything. Let's be realistic. I know Jason Brownlee caught a touchdown pass that was wide open, but again, they're nobody to write home about. So the Jets need at least like one stud, in my opinion, or at least two guys to kind of make up for like one.
So now, what is your mindset going into the draft? Are you looking for best available player? Do the Jets, in your opinion, have a need? Like, would you be aggressive? Like, I'll be honest with you right off the bat. I'm about being aggressive. Like, I want my playmaker. I don't give a shit how we have to go about getting him. Get the guy. Like, so I guess my question is that your mindset where you want to go that way, or you're going to say, what happens at 10?
Oh yeah, no, I'm getting aggressive this draft because and typically with the Jets, I've been more so of okay, build for the long term, do all of that stuff. But the problem is we have a 1, maybe 2 year window at this point. So I think, and I've said this a lot, and it's kind of what I've been going to, grabbing the offensive lineman raises the floor of the team, but doesn't necessarily raise the ceiling. Where you grab that top end receiver, that raises the ceiling. And to beat Kansas City and Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, I think that the smart move is to grab the offensive line, but it's all about philosophy. Do you think with an offensive lineman that we could beat the Chiefs? And I understand the offensive lineman can come in and they could maybe beat out John Simpson and stuff like that. Let's say it's like Fatanu, but again, John Simpson versus Fatanu. John Simpson's an average level ish player right now. Fatanu in year 1, if you're getting an average guard season from a rookie, that's a solid season. So I don't think the difference is going to be that crazy. Again, it raises the floor, but is it enough to really win that Super Bowl? And for me, year or 2 window, I'm going for it all. And a lot of people talk about offensive line depth. And you mentioned it. It's you have Mike Williams. So everybody talks about offensive line depth because of the injuries. What happens if Mike Williams goes down? Yep. And it's Garrett Wilson and Lazard? That's a problem in today's NFL. So I'm sure people know my take about it. I am all about trading up, getting super aggressive. I don't care if it's next year's first for Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of people get attached to the picks. That first round pick could be Kyle Wilson. It could be a bunch of busts we've had in the past.
We've learned them all.
And it's a thing too where people act like, oh, well, trading up for that receiver is not building for the long term. And like, in what world? If you have Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr., you can have those guys for the next 7-8 years and they can just dominate the league. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't, it's not like he's a rental and he comes here for 2 years. Like, why is Marvin Harrison Jr. not building for the future? It doesn't really make a lot of sense for me. So, yeah, I think people get too attached to picks in general. When you know a guy is up there who could be an absolute bona fide stud, if he is Jamar Chase, if he is Julio Jones level prospect, and he could be just as good, if not better than Garrett Wilson in his year one, Marvin Harrison Jr., Wilson, Williams, Conklin, Brees with that offensive line, if they're healthy, that's a Super Bowl winning offense, obviously backed by our defense, which is probably going to be hopefully, top 3, top 5. So I'm all about going up, trading, getting Marvin Harrison Jr. If you can't do that, trade up, get Neighbors. I think there's a relatively large gap. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., gap, Neighbors to me. Pretty large gap, Odunze, then a very large gap between, receivers 4 and 5. So I would be shooting for Harrison. If it can't be Harrison, go up for Neighbors. If it's not Neighbors, then, depending on where Odunze falls, there's some concern that the Bears might take him at 9. If you have to flip a 4th round pick or something like that to the Falcons to move up to 8 to get your pass catcher, that's what I'm about. I'm about getting aggressive and trying to push the Jets over the top for that Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, man. I could not agree with you more. It's like you have hopefully a 2-year window with Aaron Rodgers. I want to be as explosive as possible. I want to offset the Mike Williams injury. If Garrett Wilson gets banged up, offset that kind of thing. But you want like dynamic game-breaking talent. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm willing to sell my soul because like the Jets are a win-now team. It's an all-in year. You have a lot of good pieces here. Make the move. Like I don't like next year's next year, but you can watch the Rams have done. The Rams give away picks all over the place, making moves. The Jets are that same kind of like desperate situation. Now you kind of already answered my question, but so you have Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors. You think there's a big drop off from Odunze? Like how aggressive would you be to get Neighbors? If you say assuming that Harrison goes at 4 to the Cardinals, you say, okay, listen, I'm gonna go up to the Giants and be like, listen, the Giants can take Neighbors as well. Would you be aggressive there? Like, would you press for him?
Yeah, I would be willing to go to 5 or 6 for Neighbors. Now it all depends on the price, but like based on some mock drafts and all that stuff you see, it's like I think Daniel Jeremiah said like a 2nd round pick. I think it probably takes a little bit more to get to 5. But if it's a 2nd and a 4th, again, people are going to lose their mind about a 4th round pick. But Max Mitchell, Carter Warren, like Izzy, what did he do last year? I don't know. Shaq Evans, Brandon Dixon, all these guys have been bust. Like it's your hit rate in the 4th round is like 15, 20%. And a lot of that 20% is like maybe a guy who will be a role player. So if you're not willing to give up a 4th round pick for a guy you think can be a bona fide stud next to Garrett Wilson, I think people get too attached to the mock drafts and all these simulators and just filling all the needs. But again, the Jets are in a spot where, it's not mortgaging the future because like you're trading up to solidify your roster for this year and next year. Again, if you're grabbing that stud, whether it is Aaron Rodgers next year or another guy, if a rookie comes in, whoever it is, and you're throwing to again Marvin Harrison Jr. and Garrett Wilson, like okay, awesome, that's great for them. So yeah, and again, at the end of the day, like if you are to trade up for that receiver, take $2 million, sign Connor McGovern. Take another $2 million, sign Donovan Smith. Take another $2 million, sign a backup running back. Like people act like the draft, like after the draft, the roster is set. Like, no, we have 3 more months to sign guys. And all you do, and I think we're like about zero, like we're at about $0 right now in terms of like factoring the draft class. Right. You restructure JFM and extend Reed $10, $15 million right there. And then you sign a couple of depth guys and your roster is just as good. And now I get like wanting the offensive lineman for the long term. But again, I'm willing to be a little bit risky to win that Super Bowl. I don't think you win Super Bowls in the league today not being risky. And I'm not trying to like shit on the Jets here a little bit, but considering we have to go over Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, like, we got Robert Saleh. I think we might need that piece to really push us over the edge. Yep. And that may be Marvin Harrison Jr. And again, I know a lot of people just get attached to draft picks and, I'd rather get Brian Thomas Jr. and this random guy in the 2nd round who I think will work out. But in all reality, both of those guys can bust. Like that happens all the time. So if you think there's a guy who could put your roster over the top at the top of the draft, I'm more than willing to move up. But in terms of the receivers, yeah, I think it's Harrison Jr. Again, I'm willing to give up next year's 1st for him. Am I willing to give up next year's 1st for Neighbors? No, but like a 2nd and a 4th, I would say. Odunze, I'm not willing to give up that. But let's say that he gets like pick 8. I'm okay with like some people have thrown out like our 3rd for Atlanta's 4th and like some random picks. Let's just say it's like a 4th round pick, whatever it may be, maybe a little bit of change. I'm willing to do that for Odunze, just because I like him a little bit more than the next pass catcher, which I'm sure we'll talk about in Brock Bowers. But yeah, my goal right now is to see the Jets in the bottom of that screen with our teams coming up. The pick has been traded, and you see the little green flash, and I'm gonna bug out. I'm gonna freak out. Shots are coming after that. So yeah, I want them to get aggressive. I don't think you win Super Bowls by being safe in today's NFL. Like Rodgers was already a risky move. Let's get risky.
No, dude, I could not agree with you more. The more I thought about it, I'm like, we have to. Like, you have to take that big shot. Like, sweet, go big or go home. When you go for Aaron Rodgers, that was your plan anyway. Like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have 5 years to figure it out. You don't have 3 years to figure it out. Let's be honest. If they don't have a good year, these guys are going to be gone next year anyway. Solid, Douglas, and everybody else. So it's like, you got to do that. So I agree. Now, the question I have for you is, if the top 3 receivers are gone and you're sitting there at 10, before we even go into Bowers, that's a whole other bullshit situation I'm so tired of. But is Brian Thomas Jr. a guy that you would take at 10? Is there anybody there, or you say, at that position, you got to consider offensive line, or then you say, you know what, fuck this, let's trade back to say, in theory, to the Colts or whoever else, you can maybe still get him there and get compensation in the second round. So is there any other guy minus Bowers that you consider at 10 if the top 3 receivers are gone?
Yeah, I like how you said, like, in theory, because everybody says trade down. It's like, and a lot of people will kind of use the argument like, hey, well, there's so many tackles here that the Jets can just trade down and get a guy they like because they're all closely grouped together. It's like, is the team that's not trading up thinking about that same exact thing? It's like, why are they just want to give us, a good pick? So, I think that a trade down at 10 is probably, like, if I had to bet, like, relatively unrealistic, because who's coming up for who at that point, unless the team's coming up for like Bowers,
right?
Like maybe Bowers. A team like loves Bowers, like, okay, I could see that maybe, but I doubt that they're able to trade back. So I'm really rooting for a trade up. Now I think Odunze could fall to 10, but I am a little bit nervous about the Bears, and people say, oh, they have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, but Keenan Allen's like 33 years old, 32, whatever he is. So building around Caleb Williams, who you assume they're going to draft, I think is a good idea. But in terms of Brian Thomas Jr., I do not agree with Jay there, unfortunately. Him at 10, I wouldn't do it. I think he's pretty raw. He's like a size, weight, speed guy, but considering Rodgers likes guys who are really like well-rounded and smart at receiver, bringing in a raw guy from LSU, I don't think it would work out with Brian Thomas Jr. Not at 10. Now, if you're to trade down to 15, 16, 17, recoup a pick, then you want to take him, fine. But at 10, I think he would be quite the reach. I think the guy from I think it's Worthy would be quite the reach from Texas there at 10 as well. There he is. So I think they're like mid-teens to low teens to even early 20s guys. But I don't want to just start reaching for a receiver because we need a receiver. If you can trade down, great. If not, let's say you have the top 3 receivers who do go. For me personally, at that point, it's going to be one of Latham or Bowers at that point. And it kind of like depends on, again, your personal philosophy and like your big board and all that stuff. Because for me, Latham's the better player. But with that being said, Latham's going to play 35% of the reps, 30, 40, whatever it may be, where Bowers plays 70% of the reps. How much better does Latham have to be than Bowers to make the similar impact, type of deal? So especially when you're going for it all, again, I'm willing to be a little bit more risky. So, Bowers at 10, if it were to happen, I'm okay with it. You've seen the Twitter stuff and just how crazy people are about Bowers. So I don't want to address it. Like if it happens, it's going to be brutal on Twitter. But yeah, if those 3 guys are gone, to me, it's probably Latham or Bowers. I know, people might like Fatanu or Fashanu, whoever it is exactly, offensive line or Bowers at 10. If those 3 receivers are gone, again, I don't know who exactly is trading up for what at that point. So I would say if that does happen, they probably have to stick and pick there.
Now, before we go into Bowers, because Bowers, I have a bunch of questions on Bowers for you, but the offensive line, because you have some hot takes on the offensive line, and as a Notre Dame fan, I have some interesting questions about that as well. But so the Jets, in theory, go as offensive line, you need depth. You can maybe get a guy that, could be a great, first of all, you can learn from Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, great spot to be in. You're not pressed to start week 1, so you can kind of grow into the position. If you have to play 3 or 4 games, no big deal. What is your ranking of offensive linemen, and do you see them that are worthy of the 10th pick in the draft? Like, everybody has the same couple guys, but what is your ranking? And you're not as high as other people are.
Yeah. So my ranking for offensive line, I have Latham at 1. I'm not afraid to say that. I think what happens is a lot of people watch that one Michigan game. They saw him get blown up on one play, and then it's, oh my God, he's terrible. The Michigan game was terrible. And I remember like specifically thinking about that, like all offseason, it's like Michigan game was terrible. So I kind of like accelerated my process, went and watched the Michigan game. He dominated the Michigan game. He had one bad play, which I broke down in the film review. It's actually not as bad of a play as people think it is. It's actually kind of on the snap exchange there as well. I think it's a running back or the quarterback kind of ran into the back of him, but in terms of the actual play, it's a really hard technique to kind of to get down. And I was actually talking to Dom C, and he had is a former all-American college offensive lineman on the podcast, and we were chopping up about the offensive lineman, and he agrees. Like I think Latham is actually his 2 and Alt is his 3. So not everybody has Alt at 1. I like Alt. To me, his floor is pretty high. Like I think he's going to come in and be a solid player. I don't see Alt being some superstar player. I think his ceiling is relatively low because at a certain point, like when you're 6'8", I think he's like 6'8". Yeah. That size sounds good, but functionally in the NFL level, you don't want to be that tall because at the NFL level, and like fighting, it's the same type of deal. And this is why like guys who are offensive linemen who are wrestlers like are really good in terms of like their transition to the NFL because it's about leverage. It's about having your hips below that other guy's hips. And Joe Alt is so high that he's not able to get his hips down. And he plays a good knee bend and stuff like that. But again, when you're 6'8", you're 6'8". Like it's really hard to get down. So I could see him struggling versus NFL power. I don't, he's good technically wise in the run game, but he doesn't really move bodies as much as I want him to, especially for the Jets, who, in my opinion, because of the offensive lineman they signed this offseason, they're going to be running more power counter type of scheme instead of just like strictly zone, like not strictly zone, but more so zone like they did in the past. So I don't think he's the best fit. And then in terms of like just some of his like even his pass protection stuff, there's like little technique stuff that I get into. He likes to play at length a little bit too much. And again, fighters, you guys know this, all this, like when you play initially with length, like that's great. You hit the guy, you want to win that first contact, you slow him. But then what a lot of good offensive linemen do is once they get that first punch in, they tend to you quarter turn your thumbs, you latch, you activate your back muscles, and you pull a guy in, and then you have a lot more control on a guy when you're tight, to the chest, and you have him controlled tightly instead of like this. And Alt plays like this a lot instead of like this a lot, and so his hands get a little inactive, his feet get a little inactive. I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm just trying to give people my view of why he's not number 1. I think that he's my number 2 tackle. Like it's not, oh my God, Joe hates Alt. Just like JJ a couple of years ago. Oh, Joe hates JJ. It's like, no, I didn't want JJ at 10. At 27, JJ's awesome. Yep. I don't like Bowers at 10. Bowers at 15, 16. Okay, awesome. Alt at 10, great. Now people who are talking about like trading up for Alt, I think Afterburners and Dan, I've been on his podcast, he's been in here. If they traded a first for Alt, I would lose my mind. That is the worst spending of capital you can possibly have for a backup offensive lineman this year to trade up first. And again, I don't think there's a big gap between him and the other guy. Again, Latham is my 1. Again, that one bad play, all that really happened was, I think it was a counter or a power. That guard was vacating from his side. So when that guard is vacating from that side, there's a D tackle there. The D tackle is going to shoot up the field immediately, especially in the red zone. He has to step down, cover that gap while also covering the outside. So he's not like pushing forward with momentum. He's kind of trying to catch guys. He got blown up maybe a yard or 2 back, and then the quarterback or the running back ran into his back. And it's like, oh my God, terrible play. It's like, you don't know what people just don't know what they're talking about with that type of stuff. It is quite wild. So yeah, Latham 1. Again, I think right now his floor is lower than Alt, but his ceiling is, immensely higher. In my opinion, I have Fashanu at 3. He has to work a lot in the run game, but his hands in pass protection, I would say he's the most well-rounded guy in pass protection. Something that worries me about him and Alt actually is something that I look for in offensive linemen or just in prospects in general. Specifically for offensive linemen, though, I look for guys. I like nasty. I like guys who have that mindset because you go into the NFL level, there are some big boys there, and if you're soft mentally, good luck. And that was part of my problem with the Carter Warren and Max Mitchell picks. Like you watch them in college, and not sitting here 180 pounds, they're 320, calling them soft, but NFL level, considering them to their peers, they could be a little bit soft. And guys like Fashanu and Alt, I didn't see them like dominate guys. And then another thing I look for just for prospects in general, like when you see any prospect play like a lower school, you really want them to stand out. Be like, wow, like you could tell that guy deserves to be in the NFL, man amongst boys. I saw Fashanu play Rutgers, get beat a couple times, not look great. I saw Alt play some smaller schools, not look great. So those guys just don't physically dominate people like I want them to. So that's why they're below Latham. Latham is an absolute grader. Fuaga. So Latham 1, Alt 2, Fashanu 3. My 4 is Fatanu. Just transparency, Fatano, I watched him in passing while I was watching Odunze, so I didn't do like a full-blown review of him. He has the length, he has like the necessary aggressiveness. To me, he plays a little bit out of control. So I think he's a guy who you play at tackle, and if he fails at tackle, you play him at guard. I would be curious to see if he's actually better at guard, just because he plays a little bit out of control. And he can struggle on an island versus edge rushers because he's just not so technically sound. And it's something that I actually kind of train myself away from. Like, if you see guys on the outside who struggle with power, you can't automatically assume that they wouldn't be good on the inside because those guys are bigger. Because a lot of times guys who play out of control at tackle and maybe struggle with power, they get on you so quickly on the inside where you can't build up momentum, and then they kind of lock you down there. Like, so a guy like Fatano, I think with his aggressiveness could really thrive at guard, but on an island, giving a guy like a 5 to 7 yard head start and bull rushing him, I think he could struggle with that at the NFL level. So I'll be curious to see. But I think he's a tackle. I think he's a tackle who if he fails could play guard. Fuaga, I like him, but not for the Jets. And specifically because, and I guess he could, take over for John Simpson, but to me, Fuaga's a guard. Again, he could fail at tackle and then go to guard. I just don't see really all it is the necessary movement skills. I don't think he has the quickest feet. I don't think he has the best like lateral mobility. Something you really want to be able to see is like a redirective balance. A lot of guys who just a lot of offensive linemen versus defensive linemen are going to be off balance at times, and you have to be able to be balanced while also off balance, if that makes any sense. And Fuaga is not that guy to me. So I appreciate that, Ryder. So Fuaga is my fifth, and I would say, and a guy who is kind of a wild card, especially for the Jets, because he could develop behind Tyron Smith, who's probably the best possible guy to develop because develop behind because of how just technically sound he is a Mims, freak athlete. Obviously only 6 or 7 starts at the collegiate level, but an absolute freak of nature. So he's a wild card. I didn't watch him, but if they were to take him over Fatanu or Fuaga, I wouldn't necessarily blink twice. So
now, like in terms of the first round, so you have your rankings. What's your level of comfort? Say in our world, it should be our world, right? Because we want to get playmakers. We get a playmaker at 10 or trade up. How much of a drop off is if you have to wait to the 3rd or 4th round? In your opinion, can you still get a competent offensive line where you're like, all right, depth, maybe a little bit project, maybe a little bit raw, but he can hold the fort? Or do you say, okay, listen, we trade up in there. We may have to trade up again from the 3rd round pick to kind of get up in the 2nd round to get a decent offensive line. But how much is the drop off in offensive line play, do you think?
Yeah. So again, transparently, I watch a lot of the first round guys because again, just time allocation. I don't watch a lot of the mid round guys just because you start watching 100 guys and then they draft 3 of them. And like, I just wasted my time on 97 prospects. Like, this is just absolutely wild. So I don't have that time. I would like to keep my full-time job. But in terms of like just in general in this draft, and it applies for most drafts, the tackles go high. The receivers in the collegiate game today, like there's so many good ones that they can fall to the 2nd or 3rd round. So if you're talking about like just the value of the 3rd round pick, like if you had to choose, gun to your head, is the 3rd round tackle or the 3rd round receiver going to, which one's going to work out? It's definitely the receiver. Do I see a lot of guys that tackle work out in the 3rd round? No, not necessarily. But again, like people are attached to these picks. But if I can tell you like, hey, the Jets traded, and again, this is hyperbole. I'm not actually saying this, but like if I could tell you in a world, hey, the Jets landed a stud offensive tackle because they traded their 3rd, a 4th, and a 6th this year, and they got Marvin Harrison Jr. Like they traded up twice, and I said, hey, Tyson, you got a stud wide receiver, a stud number 1 wide receiver, and a good developmental depth tackle. Like that's enough considering that we could supplement the rest of the roster with free agency. And now I'm not saying like, I want these, I don't want the actual Isaac 12, but like I want 12 picks. I want to round out the depth, but at a certain point, like you can only play so many players. So the Jets have so few holes that I'm willing to trade up and get aggressive to fill those holes with quality. Again, I think a problem with a lot of the PFN simulators and all that stuff is people just, it's like a grocery shopping list. Okay, I need receiver, I need running back, check. But they never really consider there you go. The quality of the player, like is filling receiver at 20 with Xavier Worthy the same at filling receiver at 5 or 6 with Neighbors. It's not the same thing. So I am willing to trade up and definitely trade up and get aggressive. Now in terms of like the tackles, if you really want a guy to like be a surefire guy for the future, obviously it's a risk, but the higher you get up, the better chance you have because there's not a lot of good tackles falling to the second and 3rd round. So I'll be willing to get aggressive if that's what they want to do. And then again, sign a guy. Like if people are like, oh, well, you draft the guy, then what, then can we not sign a guy? It's like, you could draft a guy at 72. You can also sign Donovan Smith, and you can also sign Cam Fleming. Why not? Like there's 10 spots in the offensive line. So sign 2 or 3 guys at tackle. I have no attachment to Carter Warren or Max Mitchell. I know I had some beef with some former Jets offensive linemen about Carter Warren a couple of months ago. And then that same player who was saying that, hey, you shouldn't not look at this guy as a starter in 2024 was then complaining about the Jets depth. It's like, I thought you loved Carter Warren as a starter. Now he's not even a depth guy. Like that's kind of weird, but nonetheless. So yeah, in the draft, like for tackles, you want to get up high. So if you want to address both is the best way, probably like tackle, then receiver in the 3rd round, sure. But we live in a world where there's also free agency, which you could supplement the roster after the draft.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going with this. I'm like, my kind of way I'm handling this is I can get offensive line depth elsewhere. Like I want that fucking playmaker desperately. I don't want excuses for Hackett. I want Rodgers to be as best he can possibly be, and that's what you go for. But now the question is, and it's the name we got to talk about, and I can't remember the last time people argued this much over a player. Like with such hot, ridiculous takes, like they're willing to like sell their soul over it, where it's ridiculously polarizing at this point, where he's either generational talent, the next George Kittle that you can't pass on him, or he's Kyle Brady and all this, and can be Stonehands, whatever else. Now, Bowers is a ridiculously great talent. I'll give him that. But the 2 questions I have for you are, it's just Aaron Rodgers utilizing him, Hackett utilizing him, and his value at 10, where it's like we talked about, we desperately want a playmaker. Top 3 receivers are gone, and you're kind of, like you said, it's easy to say, well, just trade back. Fuck it. We may not be able to. So now you're sitting there on the clock at 10. Is it Bowers as your best available offensive weapon there? And do you take him? And what do you think his ability would be with this offense and Rodgers?
Yeah, so I think the Jets were like 12th overall in tight end receiving yards last year, and that's not, obviously it's not with Rodgers, but Rodgers is a guy who likes to go to the flat very quickly, or he goes vertical, and that's why Mike Williams is such a great fit for this offense because of of how great he is in contested catch situations. Rodgers gets in trouble, he just chucks it up back shoulder. Mike Williams is like a 60-40 guy, and there's not a lot of picks on him just because of how physically dominant he is at the catch point. So he's a great fit. And in terms of Bowers, like you saw some tight end screens last year to Conklin, you saw end arounds to guys like Gibson or whoever it may be. You could replace them with Bowers. So I don't think it's now again, we are talking about an offensive coordinator who figured out that Breece Hall can catch a pass in week 8 or 9. So I'm not giving him so much credit here, but Bowers just him in the flat, him on screens, him on orbits, him on jet sweeps. Like he can definitely, he could do that stuff. And there was enough of it in the Jets offense where I do think he'd be utilized. Now, like, is he going to be utilized? Like, the comparison is like, oh, he's Deebo Samuel. It's like, there's one Deebo Samuel in the league. Are you betting on another guy to be Deebo Samuel? Like, no, you can't.
I think I saw too.
Yeah. Like you can't do that. So he has an intriguing upside,
Is he okay? Well, let's okay. Is he a generational talent in your opinion? Is he a can't miss, gotta be slam dunk player at 10?
Absolutely not. And Pitts, and again, people will be like, oh, well, 65 degrees and 3 mile per hour winds on Sunday at this team. He did this stat. Like, I don't care about the stats. You just watch the film. Kyle Pitts was like a physically dominant player at Florida, and obviously he's not he hasn't been like utilized properly with the Falcons, but he still got like 1,000 yards in his rookie year. If it was a thing where it was Kyle Pitts at 10, like a Kyle Pitts level prospect, who I think he went at 4 or 3, even before Jamar Chase, I'd be much more willing because I see a dominant guy, a guy who could be dominant. Bowers is like, the Gronkowski comparisons like have to stop. He's not Gronkowski. He's 6'3", 240, whatever it is. Now, he has really good speed. He has really good tackle breaking ability. I broke it down on Jake's show the other day. Like, there are some tackles where guys are literally just like 2-hand touching him and he just runs by him. So that's obviously not going to happen at the NFL level, but I think he'll definitely be a plus yak guy. Again, good speed, good acceleration, good at getting in and out of his breaks. He needs to clean up his technique in some of those areas. But I also have questions about him. Like, he's not some bona fide stud prospect. Like, and I have to watch his 21 and 22 if they draft him. But I think he was like 1 or 2 out of 10 contested catches that I saw this year. One of them was a lucky one-handed catch. That's not necessarily replicatable at the NFL level. And like, people say, oh, well, he was better in 21 and 22 with his contested catches. And that's fine. He could have been. But I break things down for like the process, not necessarily the result. And a lot of his process about his contested catches wasn't good in terms of like, holding his lines, staying physical until the ball is, obviously close to him, getting a little push off, attacking the ball late, pulling his hands away. Like, he wasn't doing some of those things on his contested catches, so it concerned me a little bit. So I have questions about that. I have questions about his deep ball tracking ability. There's some times where he just completely geared down. Quarterback throws the ball to you. Tyson, you're running around in the parking lot. You're running 90% speed. I'm doing math in my head, quickly, 90% speed. Okay, 90% speed. He's going to be here at this time. I throw the ball. Bowers, he's running 90% speed. There's some times he turns around, look for the ball, and he slows down to 50%, and the ball is over his head, and people are like, oh, bad throw. It's like, no, bad tracking. Like that's exactly what bad tracking is. So, not the greatest deep contested guy, at least as of right now, 23 film. Struggles with tracking the ball deep. Again, I know some people will put up like one play on Twitter, but this is tracking. It's like, yeah, okay. What about the other 1,000 reps I watched this year? So there are definitely questions. He's a little bit raw as a route runner. Now in terms of him as a blocker, like a Gronkowski, that's just ludicrous. He's a guy who you want on the move. You want him on, you want him like arc blocking on the edge. You want him cracking linebackers, cracking safeties. He could assist, tripping on the first level. He could combo block with a tackle. Like he could do that stuff. But like one-on-one versus a defensive end, you do not want that. Like he will get blown up at the NFL level. So he's more of like a move blocker. So he's almost more so of like a hybrid big receiver than he is
like a slot receiver.
Yeah, he's not an inline guy as of right now. So like in terms of and the conversation about him is like, oh well, he'll replace Conklin. It's not necessarily true. Now would Conklin? I don't know what he played last year. Like let's just say 70% of the reps, 75% of the reps. Would Conklin's reps go down maybe 5-10%? Yeah, sure. But I think he's more of a replacement for Lazard in the slot than he or just Lazard in general than he is like a true tight end. So I get the pick. It's not a thing like, oh, you can't grab a tight end or anything like that because he is more of like a receiver. It's just that for the term generational and for the people that love this guy like they do, I just have a lot of questions about his technique. Again, contested catches, tracking, route running. And you know what it is, Tyson. Like, let's just be honest here. I think Yak is a very easy thing to evaluate on YouTube highlights. And, and Yak looks awesome. But realistically, it's like there's a lot more to football than just Yak, Like there's guys like Xavier Leggett or whoever it is. Like if you want Yak, okay, you can get Yak there. So you need to be much more of a well-rounded tight end than just Yak for me to draft you at 10. Now, again, if it is the pick, I'm completely fine with I'm fine with it. It's not my first choice. But the brutal part is the infighting on Twitter about this guy. It's like, terrible. Again, it's a thing where like, hey, I don't want him at 10. I personally don't like him at 10. I have some questions about his game. Again, you know what it is, like black or white, there's no gray area. I'm in the gray area. Like I'm okay with him 15, 16, 17. If we're forced to take him at 10 because all the receivers are gone, okay, I'm fine with it. But I don't want to argue about people with the Bauer stuff. Yeah. It is wild. So yeah, I don't know if I guess I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. But so you're thinking like the appropriate value if you're like saying a perfect world, if you, again, in my world, say you trade back with the Colts to 15, you get him at 15, you get that second round pick, whatever else. Like, you know what? That's good value on both ends where it's like not, it's not the top 10 pick. You're more comfortable with that than at 10.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like if it's a situation where you take them at 10 because the receivers are gone and they don't want to like a tackle, like, okay, it's like more of like a B minus C plus pick. Like I'm completely fine with it. It's just not a thing. Like I don't think he's Kyle Pitts. I don't think he's generational. It's just funny that like the term generational is thrown out every single year. It's like that means he's not generational. Like I've heard, and I'm sorry, Notre Dame, like Alt is not generational to me. Like there's just no way his ceiling is too low in my opinion to not be or to be generational. So to trade up for Alt again, I would lose my mind. Yeah, for Bowers, I think he could be a great player, but something else you have to consider in terms of the value of the contracts, and something that NFL teams think about when they draft players is, you draft Bowers. I don't know exactly what his contract is, $5-6 million, whatever it's going to be in his first year. He's already like in the top 10 of tight ends. Like he needs to be good considering his contract, where Odunze, $10 million or $5 million, $6 million for a receiver nowadays is like receiver 3 or 4. Yeah. So even if he puts up like 700 yards, like or 600 yards, like he's worth the value of his contract. Where Bowers, if you draft him there, like he's expected to be, he's getting paid top 10 tight end money. Get, then be good your rookie year, like, replicate what the Bills did last year with the rookie tight end or Laporta or whoever it may be. And then the problem comes with like, hey, tight ends are historically a position that is slow to develop at the NFL level. We have a short window, it's like again, there's nothing where I'm watching him and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. This is terrible. But I'm kind of like recapping him, and you can see how I have a lot of questions about him. So it's a lot of unanswered questions. It's not a thing where I specifically hate this about him, minus again, contested catches, which I want to see more of in 21, 22. But there's a lot of gray area with Bowers, and it's why I'm not I'm not head over heels with him as a prospect.
All right, so we'll go to this couple super chats real quick. First of all, Ivan, thank you. Wide receivers are always traded midseason. Why not look there in October? Why is no one saying if we draft an O lineman, he can replace Simpson, which he can, have pick 10 be a starter, and Simpson could be a really good depth piece?
Well, one, receivers. So the first part was receivers traded midseason. Like, yes, sure they are, but do we want to rely on that right now?
I don't
Like,
wait that long.
Exactly. We cannot guarantee that. So like, what if Mike Williams is hurt the first couple of weeks and then it's Alan Lazar playing and then, oh shit, that week 3 game we lost because we didn't have a receiver and then we lose the number 1 or 2 seed, whatever it is, or we lose the AFC. It's like, no, I'm not going to go into the season like, hey, I hope a guy's available in October. Like, I don't think that's the best team building. And then the second part of it was about what exactly, if you, I don't know if you did
with Simpson.
With Simpson, yeah. So I said that. I said that before, like we mentioned it. If you draft Fatanu, Fuaga, whoever it is, they could replace Simpson. It's just about like the actual level of upgrade you're getting. Again, Simpson, who to me is, if you want to call him average, if you want to call him slightly above average, if you want to call him, slightly below average, whatever it is, like he's probably, I don't know, like the 16th to 20th best left guard in the league. And if that's your worst starter, then like great. But realistic expectations. Is Fatanu or Fuaga going to come in here and be the 16th to 20th best guard in the league? Like, yeah, possibly. Maybe they're the 13th. Maybe they're the 12th. But is that jump in play really, really worth it for the 10th pick? I get it for the future. I do. It's about 2024. Like, if it doesn't work out this year, everybody can be fired. Rodgers can be gone. So, like, playing it safe is not an option for me. So, just the difference in the level of play is not worth that. Where again, Neighbors to Boyd is astronomical. Yep. So I'm looking to make the biggest impact on the roster, and I get that John Simpson being a good depth piece is great. Again, that's a floor-raising move. I think the Jets need to raise the ceiling to win that Super Bowl.
Now, the trade back world, if you trade back to say 15, you have a choice between Brian Thomas Jr. and Brock Bowers. Who are you taking?
Brock Bowers. Yeah, I don't like Brian Thomas that much. Like, I think he's an intriguing prospect, but Bowers definitely. So like for me, it's really the top 3 receivers are like my top 3 options. I would probably say Latham or Alt and then Bowers at 10. So I would only take 2 offensive linemen over him. So again, it's like, oh my God, I thought I hated him, but it's weird that I would take him over Fashanu, Fatanu, Mims, all these guys. Like, I don't hate him, but there's only 2 offensive linemen I'm willing to take over him. Brian Thomas Jr., that's like a trade down move. Again, he's an interesting guy because of the height, weight, speed. But I think he's like extremely raw as a route runner. He didn't really run a lot of routes at LSU. They didn't really ask him to do a lot. Slants goes are not really the most translatable routes to the NFL unless he's just running slants and goes and he's dominant like Calvin Johnson. And by all means, but I'm not going to put him in that bucket. Bowers all day over Brian Thomas Jr.
Now, with the top of the draft, it's going to be really interesting because there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, and there's so many rumors about the Chargers could trade back, the Giants could trade back, all this. How many quarterbacks do you project going in the top 10? Like, do you see, like, because that will favor the Jets, obviously. If you get 4 quarterbacks go, people are going to drop down. You can get aggressive, make that trade up. How many quarterbacks do you see reasonably going in the top 10?
I think it's going to be 4. I think JJ McCarthy does end up going in that top 10 because like you could say like, oh, weight and all that stuff, but NFL teams tend to like be aggressive and like get their guy. Like you don't really want to screw around at quarterback. So I do think it is 4. Is it the Giants? Who goes? It'll be interesting to see who goes between Drake May and Jaden Daniels. For me, if the Pats are going to grab like a quarterback, I rather see them grab Daniels in terms of like, okay, I think he's more can be more of a bust than a Drake May. I didn't fully evaluate Jaden Daniels, but I watched Neighbors in this entire season. I'm not the biggest fan of Daniels, so if they were to land up with one guy, then him. But I do think it is 4. Now, can I attest for like each of their individual play and if they're actually worth a pick? No, because I didn't watch them. Because why would I do that to myself? Considering this year. Because if the Jets did, I'm done. Like if they pick a quarterback at 10, I'm done. I'm out. Like I'm starting Ravens X Factor. It's over. So I didn't really look into him so much, but I do think it is 4 quarterbacks, and at that point. It depends on like how much teams value Marvin Harrison Jr. Like my hope right now for the best case scenario for the Jets, at least in like the top 4 or 5, is that somebody trades with Arizona to get that 4th pick, because if they're there at 4, they're taking Harrison Jr. That's the dream for me. Again, Neighbors is the secondary dream. So as many quarterbacks go in the top 10, obviously receivers push down, and I really do want one of those 3 guys pretty badly.
Yeah, to me, I agree with you. It's like if Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the Cardinals, I think the Giants are ones where Neighbors is going to go. And like trade the Giants, that'll be really interesting as well. Now, everybody keeps asking, I know this in the chat a couple of times, like, what's like the cleanest prospect in the top 10? Is a guy that's like you feel the safest with. Obviously, you can take quarterbacks out of the mix, but like the Marvin Harrison Jr., it's like, all right, like you take this and you don't look back and you feel like you just exhale and be like, we hit it, like we nailed it. Just not like that little red flag, little thing you see. Like, you know what? I like Neighbors, but which one you think is your top 3 cleanest prospects in the top 10?
Yeah, and it's basically what we've been talking. It's Harrison Jr. Like obviously, you talk about the size, the athleticism, the pedigree with his family. He's I can't not seeing him be like a dominant player at the NFL level. Now is he going to necessarily be Jamar Chase? Not necessarily, but I think he's a number 1. Like at least you're getting a number 1 if you get Marvin Harrison Jr. Which again, adding a number 1 to Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams sounds pretty damn nice. So yeah, I think it's him. Even though, again, I hate Alt. He's my tackle too. I think he's safer than Latham. So if you're looking for safe, I think Alt's probably the safest tackle because I think his floor is relatively high. And then Neighbors is a player who I think it's probably Neighbors at 3, but there are some questions with Neighbors in terms of like his personality. Apparently, there's some interviews, like I think he was talking about like if the Giants get him, like he needs to they need to go to quarterback or something, which like in his before even going to the NFL level, like you're kind of demanding for a quarterback. So you have him, and like I love Garrett Wilson, I really do. I'm sure you've seen it in his first 2 years. Like when he doesn't get the ball and they're not winning, he gets a little bit pissed. So you're adding him to like, let's say like Neighbors. Okay, maybe there's a little bit of volatility there, and like that's another reason I don't want Odell Beckham. So I would say Neighbors, but it's more because of the talent and not necessarily the personality. And that's something about like the pre-draft process that we're just not privy to. Like we have the film, we have some of the information, but like you never know what a guy is like mentally until you like really interview them, talk to their family, because like there's things that we could see. Like I think a perfect example of it is like Denzel Mims. Like Denzel Mims had all of the talent in the world. He does well his first year. They're bringing Keelan Cole and Elijah Moore, and then like he's disheartened because they brought in 2 receivers, and then like he kind of pouts. You see him kind of lazily running routes at practice, and then he ate bad salmon and apparently had food poisoning for 2 years. Like people blame the salmon for 2 years. It's like wild. Like I've had food poisoning for it. It affects you for a day, a 2, a week, maybe. Like electrolytes, it's get them. It's not that hard. So Denzel Mims is a guy like you could see at the collegiate level and be like, okay, he's dominant, but how did he interview? How does he talk? Did you see that fire in him? So like those are things we're not privy to, which makes the process interesting, especially for quarterbacks. Like you don't know what they're going to react like. Like Zach looked dominant at BYU. The problem was he was playing in front of nobody and playing, obviously his clean pocket and all that stuff, but you go from playing with nobody in at BYU to playing in the bright lights of New York City. Some guys can't handle it. So it's a big part of the process. And Neighbors have a little bit of questions there. But in terms of like just safety, I kind of look over that just because I think he's really damn talented. So I would say those 3 guys, which I don't think is anything outlandish at this point. So in your dream scenario, the Jets get Marvin Harrison Jr. What do you think is the realistic thing that's going to happen? What do you think is actually going to happen on draft night? Yeah, if I had to bet on draft night, I really want them to trade. I will lose it. Like I'm gonna be partying on the stream after the draft for sure if that happens. But realistically, I think that it's either going to be Odunze, if he falls at 10, I could see them trading up for Odunze, again, a 4th round pick. So that's probably option like number 1, or it's going to be Bowers at 10. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be Odunze or Bowers on the Jets at the end of the day. And again, I'll root for Bowers, all that stuff. I know that there will be 1,000 people on Twitter who will misquote me about how much I dislike him or like him, but nonetheless, it just is what it is. So I'll root for him like hell, and I hope he's a successful Jet. Like that's something that people don't necessarily realize. It's like, yeah, I can not like a player if he's a Jet. Like he's a Jet. Like I'm gonna root for him. I'm a Jets fan before I'm anything, dude. Like know what it is. Like I went to the games with you and I talked to you about it. Like I'm definitely a fan before an analyst. Like I'm not gonna go to the games and be on my phone and like streaming and stuff. Like I got my friends. Like I'm gonna go and chill with them. Draft night, I'm not streaming because my buddies are coming over. So I'm a Jets fan first. So anybody who's drafted to the Jets, like I want them to dominate, and Bowers, I think he could be a dominant player. Again, there's just a lot of gray area with him. Unanswered questions. I just don't see him as generational. I see him as a good prospect, but again, just one I don't necessarily want at 10, but I think it is Odunze. Hopefully if he falls, if not, again, trade that 4th round pick, get up 2 spots. And if not him, it's going to be Bowers, and then Twitter's going to be Madhouse. Yeah, and the thing with Bowers, it's just like you're right, dude. It's like I don't like it's fair to evaluate a player and say, you know what, he's not the perfect prospect because of this. You're not hating on him. It's just being a fair, honest assessment. Like we went through all this shit with Zach Wilson for years too. Oh, you're a hater. Oh, you're a prick. Oh, you're this. No, my eyeballs tell me this. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is what we think. It's not hate. It's just being honest. But once they're here, you're like, you know what?
We embrace them. Like, all right, you're a member of the team now. Now you figure it out and go with it. Like, it's not. That's so weird. Where it's like you got it. Like it's like there's black or white. There's no gray. There's no in between.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's like you can't just be honest. You gotta you gotta tell everybody what they want to hear so you can get your fucking subscribers. Like, I'll never do that. I don't care. That's why I respect you for that, dude, because you literally say, this is what I think and why, and it's fair.
And sometimes I take L's. Like there's, I was a little bit down on Kyle Hamilton. He's a stud right now. Like I like
remember
Icky.
that, you bastard.
I liked Icky, and I said Icky. Like I think he could see that tackle, but if not, move him into guard. Like that's one that necessarily hasn't hit. At first, I didn't like Andrew Thomas. He actually sucked in his year one, so it kind of translated. But now he's a stud. So I miss. But then people told me Evan Neal was generational. I said I wouldn't touch him to the fourth. He sucks now. Traylon Burks, I question that. He sucks now. So like Trent McDuffie is the one I hit, I think 2 years ago. He's a stud now. George Karlaftis hit that one. Sauce hit it. So like I've had some track record of success with that stuff, but like it's just crazy that like I have Bowers as my player 6 or 7, and like other people have him as 4. But because he's 2 spots lower for me, I hate him now. It's like that's not the case. And again, it is what it is. It's like the world we live in. Like people, just kind of not necessarily maybe looking into it. But like I did an hour review on him, an hour and a half review, and there's 66% positive in there. The 33% is negative in questions I had, which I expressed with you. He can come into the NFL and answer those questions and dominate. I'm not going to root against him if he's a Jet. So
now, based on the job that Joe Douglas has done this far, like I'll be honest again, like at the end of last year, I was completely disgusted with the Jets. I was disgusted with Douglas, disgusted with Saleh all the way around. But now it's like, all right, all season comes. Show me what you can do to improve this team. There were some holes. You did a good job. Do you think Joe Douglas has done a good enough job at this point to say, okay, listen, this team is a win now team, and they can win the way they're currently constructed. You add on the piece puzzle. Now it's all the pressure's on Saleh to get it done. Like, do you think say if they're both on the hot seat, is this team constructed properly where you're like, you know what? This Saleh's really got no excuses, except maybe another major injury.
Yeah, you're talking about like in terms of like JD staying and Saleh going type of deal. If this blows, no, it's JD has his flaws too. Like in the last couple of years, again, like rookie OC, rookie head coach, no backup quarterback last year. Like they just completely. And I know you guys were big about this, and like you get after like Woody Johnson and that stuff. And like you guys are kind of smart in terms of like really like thinking about like how they interview and that stuff. And it's like you guys said that you wanted him to have a redshirt year, but you didn't sign a backup. Like, what are we doing? Like, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life last year. So, like the combination of not signing a backup quarterback, not getting tackles last year, and just adding Carter Warren to the mix, who's again, raw and injured, in a year where you're trying to go for the Super Bowl. Like he's had his fair share of mistakes too. So it's not a thing where I think he's like terrible and he doesn't deserve like, another shot or whatever it may be. It's just, I'm not willing to double down on him if Saleh's gone. Like, I don't think he's so terrible that like, oh no, you definitely have to fire him. But I also don't think he's good enough to double down on him. So like, if you're going to clean the slate, clean the slate. So yeah, I'm not like a Joe Douglas, like big time supporter. Like he's like a B- GM. Like it's fine. Yeah. Now he's hit it this year. Like this year has been incredible. But it also has to work. Like we had a short window, and I feel like he kind of screwed it up last year in terms of the tackles. Now Dwayne Brown did not get Aaron Rodgers injured. The hardest part about Aaron Rodgers' injury was Aaron Rodgers got Aaron Rodgers injured, and it sucked. Like that was the worst, man. Seeing that happen, obviously I know you go to the games. That was just took the life out of me. And then 2 days later, I'm flying to Dallas to watch the Jets get their ass kicked in Dallas. Like just brutal. So yeah, he hasn't done enough to double down at this point. I think he's been decent. Like he's had some hits, JFM and Quincy and Michael Carter II in later rounds, and Eccles and Bryce Hall. Like he's definitely had some hits, but again, just not enough to double down.
Now, what is your take on the exchange of Huff to Reddick? Now, I'll say this, and I think we talked about this before, but I hated the way the Jets handled Bryce Huff. I absolutely hated it. There's a couple different times they could have signed him, got him done. This could have all been avoided. They didn't do that. They lose him with no compensation, which is stupid. But they go out and they surprise me getting Reddick, who I've always liked, to be completely honest with you. What do you think about the exchange of those guys and what Reddick could bring to this defense, where I think this defense could actually be better than last year?
Yeah. I think Reddick's a better player than Huff right now, which again, for a short window, okay, I'm completely with it. You trade a third round pick for him. We were hoping to get that fourth round comp pick back. It doesn't look like they're going to. So I think they were like in their mind, like, hey, if we get that 4th round pick back, then you're really doing is trading down from a 3rd to a 4th round pick for Reddick for a 1-year rental. Okay, I think that's worth it. I don't think they're going to get that, so I think they're going to be more inclined to sign him, for another year or two, or maybe just another year. Yep. But I think he's a better player. He's more well-rounded. He doesn't get as many pressures as Huff does. I feel like Huff did run into some sack, and again, Huff's a stud. Like, I'm not trying to discredit Huff. I think Huff had a better interior defensive lineman in terms of like pushing the pocket for him. So he kind of ran into some sacks where the quarterback was getting depth, where Reddick at times, like, he was just completely bleeding his guy clean and still had to like turn the corner, where the interior defensive line wasn't pushing it for him. So I think he has a better group around him than the Eagles did last year. Even though they were good, I don't think none of them are Quinn Williams, at that point. So I think he's a better player. But with that all being said, would I rather sign the 25-year-old player who's homegrown? Like, yeah, it's and that's like part of my problem with Douglas and some of their like pro scouts and stuff like that. I really do question their evaluations and like how they watch players. And it's not Monday morning quarterbacking, because the benefit of YouTube and the film reviews is my opinion's out there, and it's out there before they actually play. Like, I greatly questioned the Uzama signing, the Tomlinson signing, even like Dalvin Cook last year. Like, how do you give that guy $7 million? I do not understand how you give that guy $7 million. Like, that was one of the worst contracts I've ever seen. And then on top of that, like, okay, Bryce Huff, like, we watched him enough. We did the stat. Nania does 1,000 articles a day. Like, you saw how productive he was. Why not get ahead of it and like sign him for a couple of years before he really blows up? Like, waiting for the last year was just the dumbest decision in the world. Yep. And if you had a feeling that you weren't going to re-sign him, then freaking trade him during the season. Like, what are we doing here? We weren't going anywhere. Aaron Rodgers was injured. So the fact that you didn't sign him and then you doubled down on not signing him during the season, not trading him, and then to lose him for basically nothing at this point it's just terrible roster management. So yeah, I'm pissed he left. I would probably rather have him for the long term in terms of this year for the best defense possible. Reddick is the better player at this point.
So do you see this defense actually being better than last year, or do you have concerns about the run defense?
Yeah, so the run defense is a concern. I do think that they downgraded from their interior defensive line. I did like Woods better than Fotu, and I do like Quentin Jefferson better than Kinlaw. But the thing is, like, the Jets shouldn't get dominated in the ground game like they were last year, because hopefully the Jets are actually playing with leads this year, and then they can create turnovers and they can create more sacks. It's hard to create sacks and turnovers when you're down 17-3 in the second quarter and they just run the ball down your throats. So in my opinion, Jets defense will be better. Now, in terms of like yards, DVOA, all that bullshit, like, again, I don't really care about the stats. Overall, do I think they're going to be a more opportune, better defense? Yes, I do, because they're going to get chances to pick the ball. If hopefully Sauce catches them this year. Obviously, a great player, but he's got to start catching some picks. But yeah, I think they'll be a better unit. And even like looking at safety, like their defensive line, upgraded at edge, maybe declined a little bit in the interior defensive line. But I've always hated, I did not like Whitehead at all. And I think going from Clark to Whitehead from Whitehead to Clark is actually a bigger upgrade than people realize. And then on top of that, Tony Adams going from his first year, his first full year starting to his second year, like, he should be better as well. So I think the defense is going to be better than it was last year.
So just based on now on what's today, April 22nd, what are your expectations for this Jets team? Are they legitimately, especially with Stephon Diggs out of Buffalo now, Miami, with the whole Tua thing and how they play in cold weather and home, all that other shit, Patriots on a decline, they're rebuilding. Are the Jets, in your eyes, as of today, legitimate contenders to make a real run at the AFC East and like 11, 12 win season?
They should, in my mind, they're the best team in the AFC East right now. And then hope, again, if you add what I hope they do in the draft, I think it really pushes you over the edge. But like, the Bills lost, Diggs, they lost Davis, they lost Trey White, they lost Jordan Poyer, they lost a bunch of players. So I think the Bills will still be a solid team because they have Josh Allen at the end of the day. Like, he's obviously an upper tier quarterback, but I think they're more of like an 8, 9, 10 win team, where I'm hoping the Jets are obviously, going to be well above that. The Dolphins are, they're a good team. They're a highly explosive offense. They lost some guys. I think they lost Wilkins this year. And then on top of that, like, also last year, they kind of proved that they can't really beat good teams. Like, I don't know if they beat one winning team last year. Maybe it was one, but it wasn't much past that, if anything past that. So I do think the Jets are the best team in the AFC East. Now, can they overtake the Chiefs as the number 1 seed and all that stuff? Like, they've been together for years. We're just kind of coming together. So maybe that's a little bit too much of expectations, but why the hell not? Like, they can, it's possible for sure. Like, they won 7 games last year with nothing at quarterback. Like, if you just put, and it's crazy that, like, if you put Tyrod Taylor in at quarterback, which is just wild. Like, okay, disregard Aaron Rodgers. Tyrod Taylor is the best quarterback we've had since Brett Favre. Like, it's crazy that our backup quarterback's the best one we've had. If you put Tyrod Taylor in the first Pats game, the Raiders game, the Falcons game, the Jets are a 10-win team. Legitimately, that's not hyperbole. If he's in those games, we win those games. So now you add Aaron Rodgers to that, which with what looks like a softer schedule. I don't like to look at the schedule so early. Injuries happen, all that shit. You know what it is. But with a relatively, expected softer schedule, I think the Jets should be an 11, 12, 13 win team with their roster. Now, considering health, obviously it's a big factor. The Jets don't have the best track record with health, but you're looking at a top 10 offensive line, in my opinion. If you get a receiver, you're looking at a top 10 skill group. You're looking at a top 10 quarterback. You're looking at a top 5 deep. Why not us? Like, why not? And that's why I want to be aggressive and not, pity pat or kind of like patty cake around with the offensive line. I get it in the future. I do. I just don't think, again, there's that big of a drop off between some of these tackles in the first round and what you can get with Bakhtiari. Long term, it is what it is. Supplement the roster. Resign Tyron Smith next year. I don't care. Resign Morgan Moses. Who's to say we can't resign these guys? Like, they could be good players as well. So, I think getting aggressive and making that push for a receiver is what can potentially, again, get you over the hump with the Joe Burrows and Lamar Jacksons, the Mahomes. It's not a league to play safe if you want a Super Bowl, unless you hit the jackpot and you have a Hall of Fame head coach. And a Hall of Fame quarterback, a la obviously Belichick and Brady, Andy Reid and Mahomes, something like that. So
now the most important question, I know the schedule's not out yet. Are you going to Nashville for the Jets Titans?
So I already have been to Nashville. I am going to hit all the stadiums in the NFL. So that's one I'm not going to go back to.
Come on, man.
I think this year, hey, you could just change your plans. Have you been to, so I think I'm going to Minnesota this year. I think that's the move. It's going to be Minnesota and or Pittsburgh. If the Jets do play overseas, I might try to pull it off. We'll see. But I think Minnesota is probably going to be the spot this year. So
I have not been to Minnesota. That place looks amazing too.
Okay. Well,
Tyson,
I'll be there.
I've been to Pittsburgh 3 times, including the championship game. And they lost. So I'm out. I'm done with the Pittsburgh experience. They keep losing when I go there. So I'm over that.
Yeah.
Shit.
Sneakers and Boots is Arizona or Nashville. I've been to Arizona as well. I've been to Nashville. I am concerned though, if you are to go to Minnesota, my experience in 15 minutes to 20 minutes with you in real life, I'm concerned what happens if it's 2 or 3 hours. But I guess we could figure that out.
We can't handle an hour tailgate at this point.
I don't think it was that. I think it was like I think I walked back after half an hour. I was like 2 shotguns, two shots deep. And like, what is wrong with you? Like you were a lot drunker when you left. I was like, oh, well,
see, I got the inside scoop on you because I was talking to Ryan, Jets Talk 24/7.
Okay.
He had the same experience with you. So I'm like, it's not me, it's you. You're the evil influence on everybody.
I'm not innocent. We like to have fun for sure.
Well, that's what it is too. Like I'm the same way. Like if you go into a game, like everybody wants content. Like, I want to enjoy the game, man. Like I'm there. Like you spend big money, you do this, but I want to sit back and enjoy it as a fan, and just be a Jet fan and see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I fell in love with the game of football and like specifically tailgating and hanging out with my friends and stuff. Like I completely turn off my brain in terms of the games. One, the alcohol helps, and just in general, I like to turn it off. But like that'll happen after the games. Like people, like whoever like comes to the tailgate, like, oh, what'd you think about this play in the third quarter? The cover, I'm like the coverage they play. I'm like I don't know. Like I'll go back and watch tomorrow. But when I go to the games, it's strictly to enjoy it. Have some beers with my buddies, watch, typically try to have fun, but really we don't have a lot of fun. And the tailgates are fun. You go into the stadium, it's miserable. But yeah, it's again, I'm a Jets fan over that. And like, I would love to sit here and like stream with everybody on Thursday and stuff. But again, like my buddies are coming over. So like, why not have a couple of beers with them and then enjoy that and then come back and be the analyst, after the fact. So I'm just hoping like we have a good season to actually look forward to. It was supposed to be last year. And this isn't, again, me being dramatic, like Aaron Rodgers tearing, and maybe this is me being like just an idiot. Him tearing his Achilles last year was like a top 5 worst moment in my life. Like there were some grandparents' deaths that were easier than Aaron Rodgers tearing his shit. Like that was just the worst. So we are seriously due for like a really good season. And I'm hoping it happens,
So now we have a very important question. Now while we respect all other channels, not many channels have Muppets. So they have a question for you because this is a very important question. What are your thoughts on having Muppets in the chat and answering their questions?
Yeah, so I've never personally had Muppets in my chat. I don't believe I've seen Oscar the Grouch around a couple of streams, so I'm getting used to Oscar. I haven't seen too much of Elbow, at least in my stream. So I think it's completely fine. Like, why not welcome everybody? As long as it's a level-headed take and we're not going to fight.
Big Bird too. Big Bird comes in. We got a bunch of them, man.
You have Oscar, you have Big Bird, you have all this stuff. Yeah, that's great.
You don't get nowhere else.
I don't. Yeah, exactly. And that's why you guys are one of a kind here. So your streams are always fun. I don't really see too many of the Muppets, but they're welcome.
We'll see what it is. If people want to learn something, they go to your channel. If people want to just be crazy and not learn anything, they come to our channel. It's kind of how we work with things out here.
It depends, man. Like some streams you're not learning anything with me. Like I remember I watched my draft stream after we drafted Sauce, and like the first 5 words, I'm like, oh my God, dude, like you should have just shut down your computer. Like you should not have been live on the internet in front of however many thousands of people end up watching. Like you're embarrassing yourself. But again, I like to have fun. So that's exactly what I plan on doing Thursday. Coming on here, or coming on my stream, being a little bit stupid, having some beers with the people. So yeah, I completely welcome chaos. I enjoy chaos.
So now, first of all, everybody knows you, but how can they find you like around the draft, during the draft, and all your material? You guys just kill it, man. You guys are killing the content.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we have like I don't know, we have like 30 to 40 writers now, like something absolutely wild with JetX. So that's definitely taken off. We appreciate all the support from everybody. But for me personally, it's the Twitter handle that you guys see. I put up a lot of plays on Twitter of the prospects, Blewett Splits on YouTube. I do streams. I usually do them every Friday. My schedule changed recently, so I got to figure out exactly what I'm doing that. But I stream once a week. I do the film breakdowns. I tend to, like, on the stream, I'll go over like a player or two, kind of get into like not the weeds, but I'll talk about a player a little bit. But if you're talking about like really, really knowing a player, at least in my opinion, watching 2 hours of breaking down tape, like you're not really going to learn your player any better than that. And I know it's not for a lot of people, but there are niche people who really like to watch that stuff. So that's more of what I offer. And then the streams I can be a little bit more kind of stupid. So those are always fun.
Now, the other question is, can we lock you down for an interview after the draft? We got to get your, like, all right, when the Jets get Bowers, because when there's this much smoke around Bowers, it's either the biggest hype job of all time or it's actually going to happen. But we got to lock you down for like a post-draft analysis then too, man.
I'm completely down. As long as the invite comes. Last year again, I was searching the mailbox every day. I never found it. So hey, if you want to invite me back for for recapping the draft picks, it usually takes me like a couple of weeks to a month or whatever to really like get them locked down, or I really know what I'm talking about with them. But yeah, more than willing. Again, as long as that invite's not lost in the mail again, like it was last year. So
listen, I can tell you this: if the Jets go defense round 1, this channel is over. It's over. I'll be gone. That'll be it.
So the only thing I will say, listen, we drafted McDonald last year. If there's a trade down and Byron Murphy's sitting there, do not be super shocked. I'm not saying I would do it, but if you're talking about a study tackle next to Quinn Williams, how much they value the defensive line, I could see it. But at that point, you have $14 million JFM. You have Q's a first-round pick, JJ's a first-round pick, McDonald's a first-round pick. Like, it's way too much capital in my opinion, but I can see the Jets doing it.
Yeah, dude, I'll be done. That'll be end of me. I don't give a shit what happens after that. I'm done. Everything be done. Like this little farewell letter. That's it.
Listen, Tyson, you've been doing streams from what? Not streams, but you've been doing Jet Nation Radio from like I don't know, 2012 or whatever it was. You've been saying you're done for about 10 years.
I'm slowly breaking now because now it's like the Rodgers injury to me was the same thing, dude. I'm like, we've been there, we've seen it all. I was there for Testaverde going down. I'm like, this is too much now. It's like I'm just destroyed. So it's like
You're a bullshitter. You're going to be here. You're going to be here. You thrive for the misery. It's okay. But I'm hoping that again, we have a great season and we don't have to worry about being miserable. Yeah. I don't care if I have to trade the next 10 first round draft picks to win a Super Bowl. Just give me a fucking Super Bowl. Like it just really needs to happen for my sanity. And I'm not trying to go too long here, but like my sports fandom in the last couple of years, man, the Jets, Aaron Rodgers last year. You have the Mets a couple of years ago with Scherzer and all of these guys. They suck. They don't even make the playoffs. The Nets have the big three. They play 13 games together. They lose the first round of the playoffs by KD's big toe. Yep. The Jets this year, and then the Devils were supposed to be great this year, making it to the playoffs, and they missed. Like, I cannot handle more sports disappointment. So the Jets need to be good this year for my sanity.
This is not true, Elmo. They go defense round 1. I'm gone. I'm out completely. I'm going to forward everything to Joe.
It's not. I'll send you a message. Hey, you want to join JetX and do some stream? You'll come back. I'll
write articles about how much I hate the Jets.
That's fine. Listen, and like that's the good thing. Like the JetX too. Like we have some people who are obviously like film people, and then we have NYJ Matt who writes like stupid articles every once in a while, but people love them. So like you have a bunch of different flavor there. So hey, if we'll see Tyson. If we really lose you, I'll send some emails. We'll see what we could set up.
Well, first of all, I was looking forward to this all day, dude, because like it's just fun talking football with you, and like you have all your takes, but you have a good conviction about it. Like you're not bullshitting. And the one thing I hate the most is when you talk crap to somebody and they regurgitate the same points you hear all over Twitter and social media. Like, listen, I heard that point on the last 5 streams of the last guy that watched the same YouTube highlight everybody else watched, and like you actually say, listen, here's the facts behind the facts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's really like and again to get into it a little bit like and that's like at first it just felt like ingenuine to me. It's like I started with Jet Nation and like even like TOJ, and I kind of talked like very shallow about players. I didn't really know what I was talking about, and I felt like again disingenuous. So I really got into like the film and really wanted to know guys and get into it. So with the draft, yeah, it's tough like when you and especially for people who actually really watch and then you hear people like regurgitate the same opinions over and over again when some of them are just inherently false. And then again, people are willing to die over those opinions.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a thing where like I wish people just did a little bit more research. If they don't do research, then say you don't know. Like that's fine. Like I said to you, like, hey, you're asking me about receivers in the third round. I don't know. Like I'm not going to pretend to know things I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah, I'll be strong in my convictions because I watched the entire season with the guy, and I at least for me, I trust myself. So yeah, draft Twitter could be interesting with all these players and stuff like that again. So it is.
Look at this. Look at this. You got another award. You're Muppet approved now.
There we go, Oscar. I saw Oscar. I think he was in I think he was in the stream last night with me. One of the streams I was in last night. So I'm hoping maybe I get one of your Muppets. I recruited one of them. If I came on here, I got one listener. It's worth it.
Oh, you got to, man. Everybody listens to you guys. It's a no-brainer. Well, first of all, Joe, thank you for your time. I think we're supposed to do like 35, 40 minutes. It's freaking an hour and 15. So I apologize about that. And then have a great time during the draft, man. Seriously, like I know you get a lot of shit on Twitter, and I hate that stuff. I watch it. I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like somebody arguing with you, and they only watch like YouTube highlights. Like, come on, man. Like at least like, you can like argue a little bit, but at least be respectful. And when it crosses the line, I'm like, I don't know how you do it, man. I'm like, you know what? Fuck off. Like, I don't want to deal with your shit. You know what I mean? I'll block you and mute you, whatever. Like, I don't.
You know what I do, Tyson? I mute, I block, or I just post and dump. I'm not arguing. Like, if somebody's going to come with a level-headed take and like, hey, well, what'd you think about this game? I like this footwork a little bit better. Do you not think he's improving? Whatever. Right. I'm completely willing to have conversation with people. Like, okay, if you had alt 1 and I have Fashanu, 1, whatever it is, I'm willing to have conversations, but it's like, you don't have my opinion. You're an asshole. You're an idiot. Like, okay, I'm just not going to answer you. Like, and I have people like in my mentions who are like literally arguing with themselves for 15, 20 tweets. Like, you think I have the time with a newborn kid, a full-time job, and all the work I do for JetX to answer you? Like, I'm not going to sit on Twitter for an hour arguing with people. Like, I know I fell into that trap. I used to do it all the time when I started doing this. Now, just adios. I'll let my work speak for itself, and it is what it is. Again, like people can say, okay, I don't like alt, whatever it is, but like Evan Neal with some people that I respect, like number 2 guy in the entire draft. And like, I'm not just going to fall with the consensus. I didn't like him at all. I said I wouldn't draft him in the first 3 rounds, and I was right. Again, there's times I'm wrong as well, but I think it's like better to be like strong in your convictions and actually watch. So,
well, I mean, the thing is too, is like general managers and scouts all across the NFL get paid millions of dollars, and they're fired every year for being wrong. Like people are wrong, man. Everybody's wrong, but it's just having a good educated, like a good, like productive conversation. But once it gets to like name calling, you're a clown, I'm like, I'm out. Like, I just kind of like, I'm just over it. That's why I watch like your reaction, like all your comments and shit. I get the biggest kick out of it because like, I couldn't do that. I'm just like, I'm out.
Post and dump, Tyson. Post and dump.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, check him out during the draft, after the draft. You guys are killing it, man. And then once like the dust settles from the draft, we'll come back on and talk about that. And then I'll start convincing you slowly to come to Nashville.
We'll see. We'll see about Nashville. I just made a truck purchase. I'm trying to go to Minnesota as well. If I want to not get stabbed by my wife, I'm probably not. We'll see. We'll see if you can convince me. We'll see about the next invite. But if I'm going to Nashville, then you have to go to Minnesota. So we got to.
Well, and definitely the home opener, at least. We definitely do that in our tailgate. That's always a disaster.
Okay. Well, hey, I don't know where you guys are tailgating. We've been in J1 for years. Yep. So if you guys want to join tailgates and just get after it from 8 to 12, I am more than willing to have you guys and join tailgates. We're kind of right by the like the porta potties and the curb there, so you can like set up a nice little thing there. So yeah, home opener, more than willing. If not tailgating together, I'm at least stopping over your tailgate for a couple of shots.
No. We're gonna do it different this year. Like I'm not associated with any tailgates this year. I'm just kind of hanging out. I don't think so. Next like park by you, don't give it, and just go to town and be like, that's it. It's on.
Listen, so you just said you're tailgating with me, and you said you're going to invite me back to the stream. So I'm holding you accountable for 2 things because again, last year I lost the invite. So we'll see.
That's so true.
The pigeon got there's a strong wind. The pigeon got pushed off its course. It didn't find my house. It's okay.
Oh shit, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Definitely appreciate it. Make sure you guys, I'll tag in all the links or like that.
Yeah.
So, dude, have a great night, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll see you in hopefully a couple of weeks. And then again, whenever that week opener, I don't know who you want it to be, Tyson, but let's see Zach Wilson and the Broncos in week 1 just absolutely dominate them.
Sign me up for that.
I get wanting the game where it's like the Ravens, the Bills, but like then I'm nervous for 3 months. Like I always want to play the Pats and just whoop the shit out of them, the first week. Like that's what I want. I just want to have a nice, relaxing ass kicking in terms of on the Jets side. So
absolutely. Joe, thank you very much, man. Have a good night. Thank you guys for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. And we'll talk to you later.